Now, as promised, the news in detail. Let's begin now with our top story. Over 50 countries have called for the immediate lifting of the curfew and the release of those arrested in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a joint statement at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, they expressed deep concern over New Delhi's actions in the occupied valley. They condemned reports of widespread torture, extrajudicial killings, molestation, and enforced disappearances. The members also called for an immediate halt to the use of force, especially pellet guns in the valley. The statement called for an immediate end to the communications blackout in the Indian-occupied valley. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi called this statement Pakistan's biggest success at the UN Human Rights Council. Qureshi said New Delhi's occupation of Kashmir contravenes the Geneva Conventions. He said the UN Council should act on these joint demands. Diplomatic sources say India is planning another false flag operation inside its territory before the UN General Assembly session later this month. The Indian Army claims to have captured abandoned boats from the disputed region of Sur Creek. The Indian Southern Army Commander, Lieutenant General S.K. Saini, said security measures are being taken. Diplomatic sources say India is spreading false news to divert the world's attention from gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. After the story surfaced, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi expressed concern that India may stage a false flag operation to justify an attack on Pakistan.
India is acting irresponsibly. They're being belligerent. And if there is a false flag operation, which we fear, and they use it as a pretext and carry out some misadventure against Pakistan, we will respond. And we will respond with force.
Well, Islamabad has repeatedly warned the international community about New Delhi's intentions regarding pre-planned terror incidents inside India. In other news now, the Arab League has condemned Israel's plan to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. In a statement, the bloc's foreign minister said the move is aggressive and undermines any chances of a peace settlement with Palestinians. They called the proposed act a violation of international law. On Tuesday, Israel said it will impose its sovereignty on the Jordan Valley and other settlements. 65,000 Palestinians live in the valley and the northern Dead Sea area. President Mahmoud Abbas says Palestine will end all of its agreements with Israel after any new move. Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat called the idea a war crime. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has also condemned Netanyahu's statement. Well, following that Israeli decision, Saudi Arabia has called for an emergency meeting of the OIC foreign minister to discuss Israel's latest threat to annex major parts of Palestine. The kingdom has asked international bodies to reject Tel Aviv's latest idea for the occupied West Bank. The Saudi royal court said in a statement that the Israeli move is against the UN Charter and international law. The kingdom called the annexation bid groundless and legally invalid. Earlier, the Arab League condemned Tel Aviv's move. In a statement, the bloc's foreign ministers called it an act of aggression, undermining any chances of a peace agreement. Palestine's President Mahmoud Abbas says his country will end all agreements with Israel if any such plan goes ahead. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has also condemned Netanyahu's statement. In other news now, the U.S. has imposed new sanctions on a range of groups, including Hamas, ISIS, and Iran's Revolutionary Guards. The U.S. Treasury Department says the sanctions were applied under an executive order recently updated by President Donald Trump. President Trump says the order will enhance the U.S. ability to sanction terrorists and their supporters. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the U.S. government has refocused its counterterrorism efforts to adapt to emerging threats. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says President Trump can meet Iran's President Hassan Rouhani at the UN without preconditions. Well, the Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces is visiting China to discuss bilateral defense cooperation. Major General Muhammad Baqiri and his Chinese counterpart Li Zuocheng will talk about regional developments. During his stay, Baqiri will hold meetings with Chinese high-ranking military officials. The Iranian commander will also discuss the establishment of an Iran-China Joint Military Commission. Heading a high-profile military delegation, he will also visit Chinese industrial centers. Iran and China signed an agreement in 2016 to enhance defense cooperation between the two countries. Britain has accused Iran of selling oil to Syria from the tanker Adrian Darya 1, which it seized in July. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says Iran has disregarded assurances it gave when the ship was released. Britain seized the vessel on suspicion of transporting over 2 million barrels of oil, releasing it on August 15th. The country says Tehran promised the vessel would not head to Syria. Raab says Iran's actions are a violation of international norms. London has summoned the Iranian ambassador to condemn Tehran's actions. It will raise the issue as well at the United Nations later this month. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, meanwhile, says his government is working hard to get a Brexit deal with the EU. Visiting a school in London, Johnson said the UK will leave the EU on October 31st. He said leaving the bloc without an agreement is also on the cards. The Prime Minister said the British people and EU members want Brexit done now. Johnson said he proposed the election to get people's opinion on the matter, but the Labour Party mysteriously refused. Meanwhile, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says his party will not support Johnson's election bid until a Brexit delay is secured. The House of Commons has twice rejected the government bill to hold elections next month. Russia, meanwhile, has confirmed an alleged U.S. spy infiltrated the Kremlin's ranks and worked in Moscow's presidential administration. But Moscow rejected U.S. media reports claiming the CIA spy had access to President Vladimir Putin. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the person was a low-level official who was fired several years ago. He also dismissed claims the spy was extracted in 2017 over safety concerns. U.S. media have claimed the spy's proximity to Putin made him one of the CIA's most valuable Russian assets. U.S. President Donald Trump has fired National Security Advisor John Bolton. In a tweet, Trump said he disagreed with many of Bolton's suggestions and asked for his resignation. In contrast, though, Bolton said he offered his resignation to President Trump. The president said he will name Bolton's replacement next week. Let's move on now to Venezuela, where armed forces are carrying out drills along the Colombian border amid rising tensions between those two countries. The operational commander, Remigio Ceballos, says the military is preparing to intercept any foreign invasion. Tensions began rising after the U.S. suggested it would support Colombian border forces earlier this year. President Nicolas Maduro ordered the army to deploy along the 2,200-kilometer border. 150,000 troops were mobilized to carry out security exercises over several weeks. Tanks and missile carriers were also deployed around the La Fria airport in western Táchira. Maduro said he was placing his forces on high alert, expecting a military conflict with Colombia. Colombia's right-wing president, Ivan Duque, has accused Maduro of sheltering FARC dissidents on his territory. South Sudanese President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar will meet today in Juba to sort out their differences. The two sides are looking to thrash out an agreement before the November 12th deadline to form a unity government. Presidential spokesman Ateni Wek Ateni says Kiir and Machar confirmed the meeting will take place today. The two leaders met earlier at the State House for a few hours on Monday evening. In Sudan, the ruling Sovereign Council announced it is closer to reaching a comprehensive peace deal with South Sudanese armed groups. In a statement, the council said the two parties at the Juba talks have agreed on most outstanding issues. In news coming out of Thailand, Asean economic ministers and their counterparts from China, Japan and South Korea have said they will boost regional multilateral trade. They said they will uphold the international trading system and reduce the impact of the global economic slowdown and recent trade war. At the meeting in Bangkok, they also promised closer regional economic integration. They expressed concern over the impact of increased trade tensions on the global economy. Thailand's Deputy Prime Minister said the meeting is helping drive the regional economy forward. He said they have agreed to promote trade and investment amid uncertainty in the global economy. And coming up next in this bulletin, Stockholm offers goat yoga sessions. And Tintin is expected to sell for 400,000 euros at an auction in Paris. Let's begin this half of the bulletin in Nigeria, where a banned Shia organization claims police killed 13 of its members on Ashura Day. The group says 10 marchers were also injured in a crackdown on the religious procession. The Islamic Movement of Nigeria says its people were killed in states across the country's north, including Kaduna, Bauchi, and Gombe. Police dispute that account, saying it dispersed marchers professionally. The IMN was banned in July after a series of deadly clashes with officials. Meanwhile, the United States has pledged to offer temporary refuge to hurricane victims from the Bahamas. Washington's statement comes after hundreds of Bahamians were refused entry to the U.S. because they didn't have visas. U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan says the U.S. will offer temporary visa status to hurricane victims.
If your life is in jeopardy, you're in the Bahamas, and you want to get to the United States, you're going to be allowed to come to the United States, right? Whether you have travel documents or not.
Well, Bahamian authorities have updated the death toll there to 50 as thousands were evacuated from the archipelago's hardest hit islands. Now, Americans are commemorating the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks in New York. Over 3,000 people were killed when hijacked airliners crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. Thousands of people will gather to remember the dead and the attack. Victims' relatives will gather at Ground Zero to pay homage and raise awareness about terrorism. U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to join today's ceremony at the Pentagon. In New York City, a service will be held at the 9/11 Memorial. Mourners will also gather for the annual reading of victims' names. In memory of the event, people around the country will also volunteer at food banks, schools, and home building projects. Most people enjoy yoga because it helps them relax and focus better on their daily tasks. But in the Swedish capital, Stockholm, a new trend has taken over the city as people practice mindfulness with goats. Watch this report to see how they do it.
In Stockholm, a class now offers residents a chance to take part in goat yoga. People can practice their positions in a park while the animals wander around them and relax at their feet. The class was set up by Marlene Tyron-Backen, who first heard of goat yoga when visiting family in New York. She started classes in the summer of 2018 in Lindigo, where she keeps several dozen goats.
I think just being out in the nature, and the goat themselves, they are so sweet, and they are, you know, when they finish eating, they can come and lay beside you, they climb on you, and they just themselves make you calm.
Up to 20 or so people attend the classes. Sessions are held in a paddock and continue during the winter. So far, people have really enjoyed their sessions, out in the open, surrounded by nature.
It was my neighbor who sent me a small advertisement from Facebook that they were searching for yoga teachers. And I thought goat yoga that is sounds so great. So I just answered immediately, yes, I want to be with this.
This trend was started in the US by Lainey Moss and is sought by people all over the world.
Climate activist Greta Thunberg says Asperger's syndrome gives her a cognitive advantage in some circumstances. Thunberg, the neurodiverse climate activist, says her syndrome has helped her run the climate change campaign. In an interview, she urged world leaders to understand the climate crisis in order to prevent an ecological emergency.
In some circumstances, it can definitely be an advantage to have some kind of neurotypical diagnosis and to be neurodiverse. Because that makes you different, that makes you think differently, and especially in such a big crisis.
The Swedish teenager says being different allows her to think about the climate crisis in new ways. An original Tintin comic strip produced by Hergé was produced in 1942. It is expected to sell for up to 400,000 euros at an auction in Paris the following week. This report has more on that.
Tintin and his creator, Hergé, the pen name of Belgian cartoonist Georges Remy, have been controversial over the years. The first few Tintin stories were seen by some as a simplistic, prejudiced, at times even racist view of the world. An artwork comprised of 3 strips from the comic, The Mysterious Star, will go on sale at the Piazza auction house in the French capital.
I knew that it was something very emotional for people who love it and are passionate. There's a generation of people who grew up with it and who discovered the real Hergé with his level of art, because it's really drawing, it's something original, and it's a piece of their childhood that they'll be buying.
The work, drawn in Chinese ink, was the first design in a new format, allowing Tintin's comics to be printed on thinner sheets because of a wartime paper shortage. Tintin has already broken world record sales for a comic. A page from the 1954 book Explorers on the Moon fetched €1.5 million at auction in 2016.
Since the studio's Hergé and the Hergé Museum have a large number of strips but not all of them, we can't exclude the possibility that one day an extraordinary strip which no one has seen or identified won't appear on the market. It's still something that could happen.
At a Paris auction in 2017, an original drawing from the 1939 King Ottokar's scepters sold for over €500,000, and 194's The Shooting Star sold for €381,000 respectively.
Well, against the run of play in the escalating trade war, China has exempted 16 U.S. products from additional tariffs. The Chinese Finance Ministry says the exemption of the U.S. products from the tariffs will be taking effect from September 17th and will be valid for 1 year. It says the government wants to ease the negative impact of the trade war and benefit companies of both countries. Pharmaceuticals and lubricant oils are among the exclusions to import levies. Trade negotiators from both countries are scheduled to meet in Washington early next month. Asian stock markets, meanwhile, have mostly edged higher over optimism regarding the European Central Bank's interest rate decision. Markets are waiting to see whether the European Central Bank will release more stimulus to boost the slowing Eurozone economy. Japan's Nikkei gained almost 1%, while South Korea's Kospi rose over 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng indices too gained 1.35%, but China's Shanghai Composite Index edged down 0.2%. The Euro Stoxx 50 futures and Australia ASX also gained marginally. Meanwhile, the shares of Apple suppliers in Asia have traded higher after the unveiling of the tech giant's latest products. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here at Indus News.